trials have no pride, but the devil danced with my demons on the fairness tune to my misfortune, danced and played along my way. I had my high, had a right, had my sun, had my burns, had no gift, had my left, had my luck, had my lust, but the devil danced with my demons on the feather's tune to my misfortune, and the devil danced with my demons on the feather's tune to my misfortune, danced and played along my way. Oh God, oh God, I will have a rest, press reset, and if my heart protests, open up my chest. There's not much time left to tell you how I regret, but I did my best. All demons have been blessed.
Looking for a candidate, you have an option, only one choice. Sipping my drink, looking around, there's so much beauty as we can. And yet, self-confidence is a fragile concept that often fades away in the night. And there it comes, I don't want to guess, there's no place for you tonight. Want me to go, want me to go, cause you think I'm lying, cause you think I'm lying. No, open the door, cause tonight I cannot go hunting for stars, no, no. Like an evil satellite, twisting the truth and living as alone in this mad and moody world, society without love. And a state, my heart has been well trained, I'm gonna be your candidate. I am the hunter and you the prey. Tonight I'm gonna eat you up. Want me to go, want me to go, cause you think I'm lying, cause you think I'm lying. No, open the door, cause tonight I cannot go hunting for stars. Press my nose to the glass, it's raining outside, it's raining outside. I would like to storm in, roll like a lion, roll like a lion. But I feel your judgment, I feel your judgment. I'm so wet, I'm dirty. I feel your judgment, I feel your judgment. A bird essence of imperfection. Want me to go, cause you think I'm lying, cause you think I'm lying. No, open the door, cause tonight I cannot go hunting for stars. No, no, want me to go, cause you think I'm lying, I'm lying, no, open the door, 'cause tonight I cannot go hunting for stars, no, no, want me to go, 'cause you think I'm lying, 'cause you think I'm lying, no, open the door, 'cause tonight I cannot go hunting for stars, no, no.
Here you are again, and everyone's aware. Even the believers join into the stare, afraid of insufficiencies they elsewhere must deny. They're shaken by the whispering gleam of what is passing by. Here you are again, without what belongs to you, reigning over dreams that to no one else come true. The weight of such a power would break it all in two, if only you will know, yet you just don't have a clue. Hello, here you are again, and we offer all to you. The longing of the ugly, of those who cannot choose. The longing of the strange, by differences abused. Turn inside the uniform, but wouldn't dare to prove. Hello, it's 4 in the morning, beer on the shore. We're waiting for glory, no, waiting for more. And it's 4 in the morning, and the streets have our name. This city is ours, and this is the game. And it's 4 in the morning, and here comes the push, the longing desire, the tickle, the wish. And it's 4 in the morning, and the rush won't leave. The rush in your blood that doesn't believe that we might be wrong. We might be wrong. We might be wrong. Oh. Everything doesn't mean anything at all. I'll end your hunger, a quiet release For all your desires might manage to breathe, and the beating will turn its eyes off your head, and the pressure will turn it to walking ahead. 'Cause we might be wrong. Oh, we might be wrong. We might be wrong. And everything doesn't mean anything at all. It's 4 in the morning, a beer on the shore. We're waiting for glory, no, we're waiting for more. And it's 4 in the morning, and we still won't go home. Still chasing the dragons, but dancing alone.
Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us in person and online for this special event at the very heart of Davos. This event is organized by the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. Our focus today is on trade in critical raw materials, cooperation for a greener future. I'm Beata Jaworczyk, EBRD's chief economist. Today, we are diving into a topic that's not only timely, but also vital for our future. Our goal is to limit the global warming to 1.5 degrees, but how do we get there? A big part of the answer is fast rollout of clean technologies. But there is a catch. Both the green transition and the digital transition require access to critical raw materials. And as we show in our latest transition report, production of critical raw materials is concentrated in a handful of countries. Think lithium, germanium, rare earth, graphite. They aren't just elements, they are key to creating pathways to our greener future. From your smartphone to wind turbines, from solar panels to, yes, the bike frame. Take China. China is one of the key producers of those materials, responsible for processing of more than 95% of germanium and gallium and 2/3 of graphite. Graphite being one of the key inputs into electric cars. Yet, as geopolitical tensions intensify, we may be witnessing fragmentation of the global economy. Nations are striving to secure access to these critical inputs, often alone or in cooperation with traditional allies. And if you look at the statistics at a broader category of critical products, 30% of those were under some form of export restrictions in 2022. A decade earlier, it was just a few percentages. So this worrying trend, if unchecked, may threaten the lifeline of the green transition. So today, we have gathered a very impressive panel to help us think through these issues. Our speakers include, going from left to right, Valdis Dombrovskis, Executive Vice President and Commissioner for Trade, European Commission, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, Director General, World Trade Organization, Odile Renaud-Basson, President, EBRD, and Jakob Strauss-Holm, CEO of Rio Tinto. So let me turn to our distinguished panelists and let them reflect on the key issue of cooperation. How do we sustain and deepen cooperation? How do we rebuild trust? So, Commissioner, let me start with you.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Indeed. So now, as we are engaging in our journey towards climate neutrality, And as you know, in the European Union, our goal is to reach climate neutrality by 2050. It's very clear that this will require a different type of inputs, different type of raw materials, critical minerals, than the traditional economy. And in European Union, we are just now coming from the situation where we had to face our strategic dependency on Russia's fossil fuel supplies, because following Russia's invasion in Ukraine, it was trying to use its fossil fuel supplies also as a tool of blackmail and manipulation against Europe. So we had to unwind it. It also came at certain economic cost, but eventually we managed to do it without also any energy shortages or blackouts. And last winter, we were going into last winter actually having some concerns in this regard. So we managed to find alternative supplies. We came with our Repower EU plan, which foresees support for EU member states to deal with this strategic dependency from Russia, accelerate rollout of renewables, improve energy efficiency. So, and we are successfully implementing all of this. But now, when we move towards green and digital economy, you already mentioned some of the critical minerals which are necessary from this. Certainly, I would add lithium and also many other elements. It's clear that we cannot develop new strategic dependency, and actually many of those critical minerals, rare earths, the dominant supplier, 80–90%, more than 90% of the world supply is China. So we need diversification of those supplies. So that's why when as an EU, we are now engaging actively with reliable partners around the world through our free trade agreements and raw materials chapters in free trade agreements, through dedicated raw materials partnerships, through our proposal on which we are now working to create a raw materials club, where would we bring together consuming countries and resource-rich countries and build mutually beneficial partnerships where we would ensure supply of those raw materials, but we also would help resource-rich countries to get more value added of the resources they have. So not only extraction, but also processing, and ensure this diversification of supplies. Actually, with Dr. Gozi, we were just discussing it in another WTO panel, that resilience of supplies also comes through diversification. So it's not through us closing down to the world, but through ensuring diversified and resilient supply chains that we can achieve our goals in security of supply of necessary raw materials for a green and digital economy.
Thank you very much, Valdis. Now let's move to the view from the WTO, Director General.
Well, thank you. I think Valdis very nicely ended on a note on which I can comment. I think during the pandemic, we saw vulnerability of supply chains, and that has changed the way we think. And we saw that we are over-dependent on some critical raw materials and on some geographies in certain parts of the world. We are over-dependent on certain parts of the world for some critical supply chains. That's what I want to say. So this has come to the fore, and we don't want to be so dependent in a way that this can be weaponized. So this is what Valdis was talking about with respect to EU energy and Russia. So how do we build resilience? And so at the WTO, we actually see that there's an opportunity in what has occurred now. If the world wants to build resilience, then not just from conflict or geopolitics, but also from climate and weather events. Because don't forget that that can also lead to discontinuities and vulnerability. Then how do you do it? We believe that diversification of supply chains is the way to do it. Not just reshoring the supply chains to yourself or placing them in a neighboring friendly country. By the way, be careful because you don't know who a friend is. A friend today can be a non-friend tomorrow. So I think businesses will think critically about where are the countries that have the right business environment to which they can diversify supply chains. It's a new way of doing globalization, and we're calling it re-globalization. And then that will enable you to bring in those countries at the margins who are just exporting the raw commodities. So to us, we are quite excited. Critical minerals present a very good example of what we are advocating. So there you can marry what Valdis was saying. Let's take the African continent. Now many countries are discovering they have more of these rare earths and critical raw materials. At the same time, they have a comparative advantage for renewables, green hydrogen, hydropower, and so on. So you can marry the two. So instead of just extracting, you can build a whole supply chain on the continent and process there, thereby creating jobs and adding value. This is the way to go, and that's why we're very, very excited. Africa is the source of 12% of exports of these raw materials, but only 3.8% is processed on the continent. We need to reverse that.
A very important point. Thank you very much. Ngozi Odile-Renaud-Bassot, over to you.
So I very much share what has been said, but I will want to come back from sort of private sector perspective, EBRD financing private sector, and being very engaged in supporting the greening of the economy, greening of the energy sector, and so forth. And what we see is a big challenge in terms of needs, the volume of raw materials needed. When we look at, for example, to build an electric car, you need the weight of metal needed for the electric vehicle compared with a standard, conventional vehicle is 7 times more important. To produce one unity of energy through renewable, you need 5 times more metal than fossil fuel energy. Nuclear is 2.5. So this shows the magnitude of the challenge, the fact that we all know that to move on the green transition, we need to develop electrification, and that electricity as a substitute for fossil fuel energy, but also that the demand for electricity will increase dramatically with digitalization and so forth. So the first point is, you said it, but really to measure the magnitude of the challenge, I think, is very important. The second point is that geopolitical tensions are there and create additional challenges. Because, of course, there is a concentration of the countries who have these natural resources. And we've seen the risk of weaponization. We've gone through COVID, the need for diversification and so forth. So this creates really a need to think strategically and in a very, forward-looking manner on how to deal with that over time, and not only in the short term, but in the years to come. And what we see, and the short-term reaction is, as you mentioned, Beata, an increase of trade restriction on raw material. We were from 5% in 2019. 3 years later, it was 30% of trade restriction. So it's a sort of protectionist reaction that needs to be addressed, and that's why the discussion we have and the role of WTO and the role of international organizations are very important. The last point I wanted to make is sort of the additional challenge is that mining is becoming challenging. It's not, and Jakob will certainly speak about that, but for an MDB, doing mining project is not the easiest project you want to do. It takes a lot of time. You have a lot of, environmental sustainability issues that need to be addressed, local population and so forth. So it's a very delicate project, and the higher standards are needed, and it takes a lot of preparation and accompanying measures. So but this needs to be addressed, and we are up to do that. I think that this is, for us as a bank, one key priority, and that's why we are really keen to work with the private sector and with EU as a partner and with WTO to help sorting out these issues.
Thank you very much, Adil. So now, last but not the least, Jakob, over to you.
Well, thank you. I so much agree with what has been said. I so much agree with what has been said, so I don't want to try to repeat it, and I also know my own limitations. You know much more about some of those topics than I do. So let me try to just come from a completely different angle. And by the way, I just want to clarify one thing. Yes, there are certain areas where China has a very high coverage, but China is also super short on supplies of raw materials. They're absolutely dependent on Brazil and Australia for iron ore, etc. So all parts have problems on having sufficient diversification, and therefore, quite frankly, geopolitical tensions is very unhelpful for the world economy as a whole. But allow me to just take it slightly different. And Rio Tinto is 150 years old. We started off, let's say, the first 50 years to be entirely a European company. We started with a mine in Spain, Rio Tinto, and investors in London. And then we started expanding globally, first in Africa and then around on all continents except Antarctica. And then the last 50, 60 years has really been defined by the East. And I think there's a lot of learnings from that. It started with the economic miracle of Japan, South Korea, and lately China. But the West have always had a strategy of supplies. I rely upon the market, which is an absolutely fantastic strategy until it's not. And I think that's exactly what we learned with COVID and some of the geopolitical tensions. The East have never had that concept. The Japanese, from the beginning of, wanted to build, when they built the industry, they wanted supply chain security. And therefore, we as Rio Tinto, we have made joint ventures with the Japanese, South Korea, with the Chinese, and we have had joint ventures for 30, 40, almost 50 years. And it's just a different approach to the things. And I think we need to, if we should start getting into solution mode, think about what is the future supply chains look like for the West. I mean, if you look at it in the past, when you built societies, the supply chain was actually quite easy because you needed iron ore and you need steel making, and then the industry could get going. But now, for example, for the energy transition, the supply chain of batteries is a much, much more complicated process. And, you know, the chain is never stronger than the weakest link. And I just don't see, I see China having built a very strong supply chain for batteries. I haven't seen it in the West yet. We're trying to do many things, but to talk about a strong supply chain is, I don't think is exactly the things. That's the one part. The other part, if I should follow up on what you said, Odile, as well, is the ESG angle. It's difficult to move forward mining projects. But it's not just mining projects. The other thing of the energy transition is we need renewable energy. And we can all agree on we need solar. But you know what? Mining fills up and uses quite a lot of landscape, but only a small fraction compared to solar. And who is prepared to give away the space for solar? So we got some issues. And there's been some other debates here during Davos where I've heard people talking about that and saying, it doesn't work in our democracy, etc. And again, allow me to go back in history and remind ourselves how here in Europe we rebuilt the world after Second World War, where actually tough choices were made about building motorways, which is always a pain in the neck because you're going to steal lands from others. Expropriate is the right word. But you know, that kind of process of saying we do this for the greater good of the country, it doesn't work as efficient today as it used to do in the past. It goes without saying that companies who are acting in this space has to do things to the highest environmental, to the highest ESG standards. But there has to be if society needs this and wants this, there has to be a process around permitting where you actually get to solutions. I, for example, have tried now for 15 years to get permit for a copper mine in the US. The US has not permitted a single mine since 2008. That was to us as well. And the US is structurally short in key materials, not least copper. So at the end of the day, back to your initial question, yes, we from companies can do something, but societies has to deliver something as well. It is societal choices, and it's a partnership, and we all have to bring something to the table. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your thoughtful remarks, for setting the stage, for stating the problem. So now let's think of solutions. So Ngozi, you mentioned greening trade as a solution. I think delegates gathered in Davos are all for greening trade. But many actors have started thinking about fragmented world as a benchmark, as a reference point. How do we prevent this fragmentation becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy? How do we reignite cooperation?
Well, let me just start by making the statement that I do not believe we can get to net zero by 2050 without trade. It just won't happen. Trade gives you the scale economies to achieve the unit cost reductions in renewables and others. Fragmentation. First, let me start by saying, yes, because of the geopolitical tensions, we are beginning to see some fragmentation in trade. Initially, there was a lot of talk, but we didn't see much in the trade data. We still saw high values of trade between US and China, between EU and China. Now we are beginning to see changing numbers, and we're beginning to see a reduction in that. We also did some simulations to see if you have two blocks based on UN voting patterns. We devised two blocks to try and see what happens with trade between and within the blocks. If you look at earlier data, you see that there was just as much trade between different blocks as within. Now we're seeing in recent data that trade is growing more slowly now between blocks than within blocks. So that is a sign that there's some emerging fragmentation. And I can tell you other indicators that we see. However, we've also done work to show, and the IMF built on it, that if we were to fragment into two trading blocks, we would lose 5% of real GDP in the longer term. Real global GDP, that's a lot. You know, like losing the economy of Japan. The IMF built on this work, and they are showing 7% GDP losses. They're also showing fragmentation in FDI flows. Now, you say, how do we deal with this? It is by sharing the data. And I think what I'm proud of is when we first presented this work at the IMFC, the meeting of the bank and the fund, 2 years ago, we began to see a change in the language. Initially, it was all about decoupling. Now, there was talk of de-risking. We don't decouple because it is too costly to the world. Fragmentation is something we cannot afford. So that is what we are saying. Share the data, do the analysis, show what it means. Talk is cheap, but if talk manifests itself into real action, the whole world will lose all around. There'll be double-digit welfare losses for developing countries, so it will be even worse for them.
Thank you. We actually did a similar simulation for our countries of operations. And indeed, we found very similar patterns. 20% increase in barriers between the blocks means that essentially every country loses. And the countries that lose the most among our portfolio of countries are countries with links to two blocks, right? To economies that would find themselves in opposing blocks.
Yeah, can I just add one thing? Sorry. Odile referred a lot to export restrictions. And it is true, we are concerned. We're seeing increase in, this is something we monitor. Actually, we started monitoring the prohibitions and restrictions from 2009 after the global financial crisis. And we've seen a sharp, first it was gradual, but now it's a sharper increase in these restrictions. So we are worried, and we are saying to our members, if we continue to have this it will be a pullback on global trade, and we need global trade to be free and fair in order to recover.
Thank you very much. Excellent point. So, Valdis, Ngozi challenged you in a way by saying, well, Africa has the resources, Africa has great conditions for producing renewable energy. You mentioned earlier provisions that in free trade agreements that promote placing a value chain in countries with whom EU cooperates. So how does it work in practice? What do you expect to see? How can EU help make this happen?
I already was mentioning some of the forms of engagement in this area of raw materials, like critical raw materials, strategic partnerships. So far we have strategic partnerships with Kazakhstan, Chile, and Argentina. Previously, we had ones with Ukraine and Canada. And most recently, we added 2 African countries, Democratic Republic of Congo and Zambia. We are now also engaging with Uzbekistan. And the idea of these engagements and also of this critical raw materials club, which we are discussing, is to find this mutually beneficial cooperation model where we are ensuring security of supply of raw materials, but at the same time we provide financing, we provide investment, technology for those countries to develop the value chains, to develop not only extracting but also processing. And clearly there we also see the role of European financial institutions like EBRD, which can help in these areas. For example, we are now planning to launch with EBRD critical raw materials exploration equity investment facility to deal exactly with these kind of issues, and also there is financing available under our Global Gateway initiative. So it's indeed finding this right mode of cooperation because we see that there is a complementarity. We just need to get together and, in a sense, use this complementarity.
Thank you very much, Valdis, on telling us what the EU is doing on its part. So, Odile, EBRD thinks of itself as a green bank. What are the key steps that need to be taken to make green transition a reality? What can we do to help?
So, because of all the discussion and what we explained, we believe that we need as a bank to invest in raw material and in mining industry and so forth. So that's, and we because this is a key enabler for the green transition. We also see that because we are a bank for the transition to support emerging developing countries to grow, that this is an opportunity for these countries. And it's, you were talking about the challenges for the development of solar panel plants and so forth, but it's also for some countries, think about North Africa, Egypt, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan. There are countries with huge spaces where, I mean, they do not have the constraint we have on solar panel and so forth. So, and they have, I mean, very Africa, sub-Saharan Africa is also huge potential in terms of solar, wind, and so forth. So this is development of renewable, and the green transition is an opportunity for these countries. They can really become energy hub, net exporters of energy and electricity. And to do that, we need the mining and the raw materials. So the balance, the mutually beneficial approach, and where both parties more advanced countries and developing countries have a joint interest, joint venture approach, or to develop this kind of project is important. And when we want to invest in this kind of activity, we bring a high level of standards. It's demanding for the partners, for the private sector clients, but I think it's also a guarantee to get the project moving and with a high quality in terms of social impact, environmental impact, and so forth. So very often it takes time, but we are really willing to get the regulation right, so to have the regulatory framework at the country level right, to have energy involved in the development of the mining as being green energy, so decarbonization of the process, innovation, digitalization, circular economy is an important component of also on this kind of approach. And ensuring that the mining company has the best environmental and social standard. And that we are demanding, but also I think it facilitates, in a way, it's a condition for the acceptance of the project. Because we've seen a number of projects, when this is not there, then project can get into trouble and it becoming much more difficult.
It's such a beautiful thing to be invited to this debate and by Odile, and then get on record that she's saying that EBRD is very demanding, but
it's good for you. But actually, it's good for you.
But that's exactly my point. Here's the thing: it is about trust. And even if I put on my best smile and I put on my nicest tie, I come from mining and I have a commercial interest. And you can work a lot in a country. But the reality is, I learn again and again that countries, in order to feel comfortable, would like to hear from different stakeholders. How do you see these things, and to what standards, and those sort of things? And therefore, it's not small projects we are talking about. We are talking about projects that has massive impact on countries, and such societal choices requires kind of different institutions to hold each other accountable, but also to create the trust, because you just cannot progress with those things if you don't have all stakeholders comfortable with a project. So I do think that EBRD demanding, but plays a very important role.
Jakob, please.
May I ask the CEO of Rio Tinto a question? I know I'm not the moderator, but it's so we are talking here of these critical raw material supply chains on the ground in Africa. You have been there for a long time, and much of that time you've been mining and sending up. Tell us, how do you see, are we talking pie in the sky? Or can you really build these value chains in a different way in country, marrying the green hydrogen with the critical raw materials and processing them the way that Valdis and I are talking?
Yeah, so let me be specific on this. First of all, you have to be patient, because it's not that projects are hanging on the trees. So here at Davos, I speak to a number of governments in Africa, and they say, we would like to be part of the energy transition, and we believe we have minerals, etc. And the first thing you have to do is exploration. And that, unfortunately, sometimes is negative and sometimes is positive. But there are very few companies who actually have the exploration expertise. We happen to have it, so we are super, super busy at the moment. The first step, and right now we're doing very active exploration in Malawi, in Rwanda, in Angola, in South Africa. I could keep on talking. When you then find something, you need to get into the project part, and that's actually where it's quite often quite nice to joint venture and partnering up, both with host countries, but also with other companies, because let's face it, that's where you have to invest a lot of money, and things can change as you go along. But we definitely can deliver these things, and right now you would have seen that we have just taken, together with Chinese partners, an investment decision of more than $20 billion together on building the iron ore project Simandou in Guinea. So projects are happening. People just have to be realistic that you have to go through the various phases. We're trying to accelerate exploration, but these things take time.
So Jakob, you mentioned that societies have to deliver something, that in your previous intervention. So we see a lot of goodwill, there is interest from developing countries. EU is ready to help, EBRD is ready to help. Are you optimistic that the supply of critical raw materials will keep up with the demand?
Yeah. I mean, starting point is there is enough materials in the world. There are certain things that are more difficult than others. It's going to be quite difficult, and it will require a lot of effort to deliver the copper growth that's required for the world. Right now, there's been some, humps on the road for lithium, but there's ample of lithium in this world. So the only problem is it depends on how fast is the demand curve going up. But over time, absolutely. In general, the world has got the materials. Copper is the most difficult one because, in general, there are no easy copper mining. It tends to be deep underground, and it takes a long time to define those things. And it's also about how high a grade can you have in order to have it economically possible. But yes, I am optimistic, but I can also already foresee that there will be some bottlenecks as we go along, because as soon as you start identifying a problem, you know that when you take corrective actions, it will take years before the impact will come.
So the view from the private sector is it takes time. We need to explore, find the reserves, bottlenecks cause delays that take years. So Valdis, you laid out a very nice strategy. How soon can we see the fruits of the EU approach? So do you think we are talking about years, decades? What's the time frame?
We are definitely talking at least years. It's not going to happen overnight. But for EU, it's of critical importance if we are to achieve our green and digital transition goals. We have our critical raw materials strategy in the EU. We also have our own, so to say, domestic production targets. But our target is by 2030 to source, in terms of extraction, 10% of our domestic consumption. And also this, in a sense, is based on somewhat optimistic assumptions. We have higher targets for processing, like 40%, and for recycling, 25%. But it's clear that to a large extent, our green and digital transition will depend on external raw materials. So for us, it's integral part of the strategy. So we cannot say that we'll somehow be onshoring this or something like this. It's indeed about diversification and diversified and resilient supply chains. So that's why we're willing to do it. That's why we're willing to engage, dedicate also financing to this, stimulate the private sector in this direction, apply our what we call Team Europe approach, where we're working together at the EU level, EU member states, European financial institutions, and all work towards those same goals. But I agree fully, like raw materials, it's not something you can change the picture overnight. It really takes years to prepare and build up this value chain.
Thank you, Valdis. Let me give heads up to our audience that we will be taking some questions from the audience. So start thinking about them.
Would you allow me just a very short comment?
Please.
Because there is something happening, and it does make a sense. It does make a difference what EU is doing. So, for example, you make an agreement, a strategic agreement with Chile. We, at the same time, talk to the Chilean government. They want to work with their state-owned company, Codelco. We sign an agreement with Codelco. We are actually, months after you signed the agreement, we already have an exploration, and that started in November. And already today, there are people on the ground who are doing things. So it's not that action is happening years down the road. Action is happening right now. It just takes time to get the product to market.
Right.
So I hear some cautious optimism, but things will not happen overnight. Ngozi, is the glass half full, half empty? Are we going to see trade helping out here, or are you worried?
For me, the glass is half full. I hear talk of challenges. Odile said challenges. I look at this as opportunities, but they have to be done right. And if we continue to work in the old ways, then there'll be lost opportunities. But I definitely see that trade can play a very strong part. Indeed, the world cannot decarbonize without trade. There's no one country that has all the, as you mentioned, China itself, where 93% of these things are processed, or is seeking some other raw materials and doesn't have enough. Without trade, how would that happen? You cannot have it. So I'm optimistic, and I think we need, though, to keep trade predictable, stable, and fair. And those rules underpinning global trade that we oversee at the WTO, is essential that we not undermine them with unilateral actions or protectionist measures, because we all will need trade in order to be able to make it.
Thank you. Very, very well said, music to the ears of a trade economist. Trade is a way of diversification. Trade helps with diversification, both on the import side, on the export side. Odile, how important is diversification to our countries of operations?
I mean, diversification is an opportunity for our countries of operation because basically they have, capacity. These are countries which need to grow. They have some potential for being at the receiving end of investment for diversification. And we see that, we are working in countries which are relatively close from the EU, or we had, also Central Asia and so forth. These are countries which could, North of Africa, could very well benefit from development of new capacities in the reorganization of the value chain. They could also suffer if the tensions and the geopolitical tensions increase and the bloc logic could be very detrimental. Central Asia is at the middle of the blocks, so in a way they could suffer very much from it, but they could also benefit from it. And I think that it's very important in thinking about projects and how we can ensure that they have the right framework, the right policies in order to be able to attract these investments.
So in a sense, these countries are at the crossroads, right?
Yeah.
There's either a lot of opportunities or some challenges ahead. Now, we have very prominent audience as well. Are there any questions in the audience? Yes, may I please get a microphone? And perhaps you could introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, I'm Fabrice Naudet-Langlois from the newspaper Le Figaro in Paris. Sorry, I came late to this session, so maybe my question has been answered, and it's a question prominently for Commissioner Dombrovskis. Are there any plans to install common strategic storage for critical materials? Is it only fiction or utopia, or could it be a real plan one day? Could it be of any use?
As regards common storages, that's actually a good question, and one may say that indeed we have somewhat old-fashioned common storage approach, and we do have strategic reserves, and that's an EU regulation on oil. But now when we move to green and digital economy, indeed, we probably need to look on also new materials. It's currently not the case, but indeed something we may look at. Also, following Russia's aggression in Ukraine, we created a mechanism of a common purchase of natural gas and solidarity mechanism within our storages in case of supply disruptions. But again, it's all still fossil fuels oriented. Obviously, that was a response to the immediate challenges which we were facing. But as we move forward now towards this green economy, I think that's a very valid question, and we will need to look into this.
Thank you very much. Any more questions from the audience? While you're thinking of your questions, Jakob, may I ask you, could you comment a bit on ESG, on challenges, environmental challenges? We know that some of those critical raw materials have pretty unpleasant side effects.
Well, it's how you do it, really. Two sides. There's the mining side and there's the processing side. The mining side, and it was quite interesting. Yesterday evening, I attended a dinner here for ICMM, a big dinner with CSOs on nature, and ICMM disclosed their new guidelines, policies for nature preservation and how to have nature positive outcomes, because I think what you were saying behind the lines, history is not always a very good experience. It is possible, both when you do the project of a mining, when you have the operations, and more than anything, that you clean up 100% afterwards through the life cycle to get that right. On the processing side, obviously, processing plants has to be designed to the highest standards. And the most critical part of the processing is the energy, because that's where you have the energy intensity. And I heard also, I think it's a fair deal that producing countries that has mine should also have the employment from processing. The key thing there is, though, do you have access to renewable energy? Because otherwise we create another problem. so there's a few things there. I do think, though, it's very important when it comes to ESG that it's not just a scientific work. It's a lot about local communities, First Nations people, indigenous people. You can go out with all sorts of good scientists and they'll say you have to be careful of this and this and this, but you do need to have the deep connection with the land-connected people who might actually tell you it's completely different. And that's why it comes back to it's not easy, and these things take a long time. I have this view that that's absolutely okay. It will take the time it takes. I have much less sympathy if I may use the word, I sometimes see that administrative procedures on getting permits are just taking years and years. But building relationship and trust and understanding the needs of the local community, that takes a long time.
Thank you very much for this very important point. So we've covered a lot of ground, right? We talked about friendships being fleeting, so diversification is the way to go rather than reliance on one or two friends. We heard about greening trade being a solution. We heard about the need to help developing countries capture part of the value chain rather than just export raw materials. The forum is coming to an end. Our session is slowly coming to an end. What is one parting message you would like to leave our audience with? Valdis.
When we are discussing greening the economy is there to address our global challenges. Climate change, biodiversity loss, pollution. So those are global challenges which we need to address, and obviously we'll be best equipped if we'll address it in a globally cooperative way, and that's the approach we should be pursuing.
Thank you very much. Gozi?
You cannot solve many of the present challenges facing the world without trade, and without open, predictable, and stable trade. And if we have problems with the trading system, let us reimagine the way that trade works in order to solve those problems. But support the multilateral trading system. Don't do away with it.
Thank you. Odile?
I would say that it's very clear that to manage and to succeed in the green transition, we need to develop raw material exploration and exploitation and so forth. There is no, opposition into that, but we need to do it in a way that is consistent with the objective of the green transition. And that's where we need to be demanding and ambitious in this kind of project so as to be, not to be in contradiction with our own objectives.
Thank you, Odile. And Jakob?
Yeah, thank you. Just to say, again, to repeat myself, it's societal choices. We need to have public-private partnership, which also includes industry policy. I completely agree with we need to defend the free trade, but one of the biggest problems facing a company like my company is that we haven't been able to agree on a global CO2 tax, and therefore, how can you decarbonize if there's no incentives, economic incentives for decarbonizing? Now, I realize the public should not solve all the private companies' issues, but in general, I'm against tariffs. But exactly, putting a value on externality is not a bad idea.
Well, I have good news for you. We just agreed to form a task force. So we found out that the IMF, the World Bank, the WTO, the OECD, we were all working on a global carbon pricing framework with slight differences. And when we found this out, Valdis was there, Odile, you were there. So I suggested to all the finance ministers, why don't we form a task force? Why are we working in parallel? And it was agreed. We now have a task force coordinated by the WTO, and it's just kicking off. Every organization, institution has nominated someone to be on it, including the United Nations, represented by UNCTAD. And we're now going to work on a global framework. It doesn't mean that countries cannot set their own price or have their own mechanism, but we'll have this as something you can measure against. And I think that will become, it will help business.
What a beautiful closing. Thank you.
Exactly. Good news is exactly how we wanted to finish this. Big thanks to our esteemed panelists, Jakob, Odile, Ngozi, and Valdis. Big thanks to our audience. I encourage you to find online our transition report and read more about critical raw materials. I'm Beata Jaworczyk. Thank you for staying with us, and goodbye.
In dem Dorf, wo ich herkomme, ist der Fußballclub schwach. Doch wenn der spielt, dann ist man gleich dort. Wie so eine Wurst und Klickklatsch.